And so is there anything serendipitous about your particular storytelling? Do you think there was a moment where you were like, oh, this is the path I'm supposed to take? Well, where a coincidence happened and you were like, I'm a storyteller, I'm a writer.
Oh, it happens all the time. And yeah, there were way back moments where I knew it was what I was going to do. But I clearly do very clearly remember a moment. I would have been 20, probably, maybe. And I was taking a walk. And I do remember there was this very dark sky. And then there were seagulls that came out and the sun was shining on them and they were silver. And there was one, sometimes when you're walking, you get that moment of, and the angels sing. And I had this thought in my head. It's like, I'm going to go into dark places and write stories that come from the darkness, but have hope and healing and something in them. Way back then, and it was years after that I actually wrote my first novel and got published, but I still remember that clear as clear. Yeah, interesting, isn't it? And then my whole publishing career has been one little moment like that after another. I have a whole trail of them that I was just thinking about this morning, actually, about how I got where I am.
Yes. Yeah. It's always, I've tried to explain that to my children who are young adults now, that you kind of look backwards and you go, oh, if I hadn't crossed paths with that person, all of these other things on this path would never have happened.
Exactly.
And it is always, so it's good as you're moving forward to be aware of the connections you're making, and the power of each one.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of Robert Frost's poem, The Road Not Taken. I've always loved that. I took the road less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. And I've come to believe that it wouldn't matter which road that person had taken in the woods. They still would have had a wonderful journey, but it would have been a different journey. And so every time you have an encounter, everybody you meet, every decision you make does take you down a different path. But hey, it's all awesome and fun. I
agree. I think there's something really beautiful about that particular Robert Frost poem. Yeah. And I've had moments, like you were describing a moment in the woods. I've had moments where those words come to me even. He captures how you feel in nature sometimes just
perfectly.
Profoundly, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. Checking my notes, because we went off on a little tangent, as I always do. I know. I wanted to ask you about, there are a couple tattoos in this book. I loved the one at the beginning. Nickel and a childhood friend who was a foster kid, they both have star tattoos that match, right? Let's say, may the stars align. There's also a tattoo that she has that is a reference to an Alfred Lord Tennyson poem, right? Yeah, the curse has come upon me. And Hawk has a tattoo. So do you have any tattoos?
I do not. I think they're fascinating, though. They tell a story, and everybody who gets one has usually some kind of reason. I mean, there's the drunk tattoos that don't necessarily mean anything, but anybody who's put any thought into the tattoos that they get, that says something profound about where they were at the time, who they are as a person. And I am always very fascinated by that. I every now and then think maybe I should get one, but I've not been moved to do so.
Yes. I wondered, I think it's so funny. I don't have any either, but it's partly because I place so much weight on it that I think it really is a meaning, that it says something about you. And so it's hard for me to figure out what do I want to say about me forever, right? It's always going to be saying that about me forever. Maybe it'll be a Robert Frost poem. Who knows? It would likely be words, not images, I think, knowing me. But yeah, so I think even actually the main character sort of plays it off a little bit, right? The curse has come upon me. She doesn't really, when Hawk asks her about it, she doesn't say,
she underplays it at the time because she really doesn't want to give away of anything of who she is to this man that she has just met. Yeah,
that's true. She's very private at that point. Yeah. I think the other line in the story, there's a point in chapter 7 when Andrea Lester, we're just getting to know her, I think, and she's very unsettled by Nickel. And she says she feels like a snow globe that's been shaken. That is such a great, like I could actually feel that when you use that phrase. I thought, oh, I felt that kind of unsettled. Yeah, I really like that. Where did that come from for you? Or do you?
No
You
idea. I like snow globes. That's all I can tell you. I don't know. Really, the best of my writing just kind of happens. I don't sit down and think, all right, well, now I need a really good metaphor. Every now and then I get stuck and I do that, but usually they just kind of come to me and I go with it because the characters seem to know themselves better than I know them. And so they come up with stuff and I let them do that. That works for me.
That's amazing to me that you have that the people, well, again, it comes back to that auditioning, right? That the characters just sort of show up and tell you who they are and what their path is going to be. And I think, everybody knows what that feels like, right? To feel unsettled, that's a human emotion. It made sense to me right away. The other things that I thought felt really normal when you said it, although you put it, again, this is a book that the premise and the context are something I'd never heard of before. And yet a lot of the emotion felt very relatable. Even in that very first chapter that we're going to feature, she calls it a sensation of wrongness. She knows something's not quite right. And I think that, and then you say it creeps up her like a spider in her vertebra, and it gets a little, it was really, but the idea of a sensation of wrongness seems very universal to me, that everybody, I think, can relate to that idea that I've been somewhere and thought, oh, something doesn't feel right. So I really love the way you made that part of this magic, really, this component of that wasn't necessarily, it was an otherworldly sort of thing that it's connected to.
Right. I love to build my little bits of magic out of reality. So I think that it works best when you do that. And so very grounded in what is a universal emotion. At least, for me, that feeling of wrongness, I know that feeling. I know to pay attention to it. It has served me incredibly well so many times over the years to notice something feels not good. Something feels wrong.
Right.
I believe it saved my life a few times. So I really am grounded in that. So it made sense for me that she would have a feeling like that. And then I'm like, well, what would that feel like? Well, we're always talking about little crawly things up your back, and that's boring. So I'm like, well, okay, let's amp that up a little bit. So that's what we do.
It was a nice visual, or it elicited a feeling immediately. The idea that the spiders were coming up her vertebra. The other thing in the scene we're going to hear has to do with energy. She says that she thinks that books absorb energy. And I thought that was such a lovely concept. And as someone who really does love stories and books, like I just love to go into a bookstore, love to go into a library. Where did you get that concept of like that somehow the book itself has a form of energy to it? Or that they absorb the energy from the people that have read them. Like, I just like that concept.
I like that concept too. I kind of have a sense that some objects do have energy. There are things that you feel like you don't want in your house. There's nothing really wrong with them, but they got that feeling. And I feel like with books, we are so open when we're reading. There's this sort of communion between the reader and the words where we're not guarded, where we are being fully and completely absorbed into this world that we're reading. And I like to think of it as a flow of energy that goes both ways. So also, in the background of that, I have heard stories about people who are able to kind of pick up what's on a page with their eyes closed. They're not blind, they are not reading Braille, they just kind of have I've heard all these little woo-woo stories that I like very much because I love that stuff and want it to be real. So it just seemed to me that of all of the objects in the world that would have energy, books would totally be it. I mean, think about it. If you favorite magic books, like things, if we do want to talk fantasy or witchcraft or whatever, there's always a book. And it always has that kind of vibe to it, right? So
yes, that's true. It's written somewhere, and it's a great That's so true. You're right. That books themselves are sort of woven into those magical elements of
Oh,
stories
absolutely.
and are
And not
connected
just
to.
magical elements. I mean, let's talk about something like the Bible. We consider, so many people will consider that this is a holy item, that it must never have anything said on top of it, that it must be treated with respect. There's all these things that we have woven over the years into many, many different kinds of books. And sure, you want to talk about a holy religious book that may seem different to some, and yet to me, all books are a little sacred.
Yeah.
So it's just, it made sense to me that for me, that wasn't even a stretch.
Yes. So I just want then so people should know that the reason we're talking about the book is that it is a book that she moves that is the real catalyst for this particular moment in time in her life that sends her on a journey that intersects her with all of these other characters and people who are solving problems in their lives, and you come to a nice resolution. And when we first started, I was saying, oh, it's not a fairy tale.
No.
No, it doesn't. There's nothing like, there was a point in the story where I was like, oh, wait, is this going to be the coincidence? And it was just going to be too much of a stretch.
Right.
But you didn't do that. You didn't
No.
take like this obvious thing.
I wanted readers to think I was going to do that and be surprised, though.
You did. So, yeah. You got me. You totally got me, because I was like, wait, what? But yeah, you don't jump into, you don't go under full submerged into magic story, fairy tale, perfect bow at the end, Disney princess connection.
No.
It is, you keep it in a realm of, this could be possible.
Right.
That could actually happen.
Good. I was aiming for that. Really, I don't know that I realized this at the time I was doing it, but now that we're talking about it, it's a hero's journey story, really. But it's in the real world and not in a fantasy. So I've taken my favorite fantasy arc of a character who is presented with a quest, so to speak, right, which is the book, and that launches them into a world of things that they don't quite know what to do with, and a gift that they have that has a little bit of a magical element to it, maybe that they don't know how to control. And then the question becoming, will my character find a way to control and use her power for good? Yes. And so really it is kind of that same old arc that I do just really love in the fantasy books that I read.
Yeah, no, and I think, oh my gosh, I'm so excited for her to have a happy ending. Like I do really, like I'm cheering for her through, there's a little bit of courtroom drama in this book. And it wasn't that I didn't want her to have a happy ending. I just really appreciated that it didn't feel like contrived in any way. You know, she finds her own version of happiness in this. Right. And so did the people around her, which I really loved it. I thought it was really good.
Well, thank you.
It was awesome. Let me check again, make sure there's not a. So I'll go on. So the thing that I always ask authors, and we'll wrap it up. I've had a lot of your time. Thank you so much. So the podcast is called the Desideratum, which is a Latin word that means essential things. And when I was growing up, there was a poem called Desiderata. It's not a rhymey poem. It is really a list of things that are essential if you were going to share with someone what you should value, what you should strive for. And when I was thinking about doing a podcast, I felt like connecting with storytellers and understanding better how they come to their craft and their storytelling, and sort of opening up their books in a way and trying to connect to me felt very essential, especially during COVID. I felt so disconnected from everyone during COVID that I was reading a ton. And then I realized, oh, if I could ask this author what they were thinking right there, like that would be a gift, right? And so that's where it comes from. So I like then to ask authors that join me, for you, what are the essential things? What is most essential to you?
Essential to me. It's funny because a lot of it is the same themes as tend to come out in my books. So following your own path, being your own self, to your own self be true. Although I can never do
Yeah.
that because the guy who actually said that in Hamlet was such a crazy character. You don't really want to follow his advice, right? But Polonius.
Right?
Um, but that whole thing of, we're here as this unique person. Nobody else can be you or see the world in the way that you do or do the things that you can do because you are the only one who is you. So being really true to that and following where that leads me, that is really top of the line importance for me. And then I pursue joy. I think we're here to be happy. I don't know that we need to be miserable. I mean, things are not always easy, but
Right.
I'm always going to find the happiest place I can be in, anywhere that I am. I like to do things to uplift and inspire others.
Yeah.
Those are my probably top three. Freedom, self-determination, those are really, really up there too.
Yes. Those are great answers. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. This has just been
Yeah.
absolutely delightful.
Yeah. I'm really glad to have gotten a chance to just spend more time talking to you.
Yeah.
It's, you have you have a great voice as an author, but it's it's always interesting how the real person is different and yet the same,
Yeah. Yeah. No,
you
I hear you.
know? It's a funny thing to get to know authors on just a little different level. So I
Right.
appreciate it. Well, my goal is to